You're listening to TGI Sports Talk with your host, Keith Angle, on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good evening, everybody. Keith Angle for TGI Sports Talk's College Sports Huddle. It's great to have you with us tonight as we begin our transition from just college football into more of the NCAA basketball season, as you can tell by our change in music. Anyway, we'll still talk football as well as NCAA basketball. We can talk anything you want about college sports. In fact, when we get into baseball season, we can talk a little bit about that. Glad to have you with us tonight. I welcome everybody on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. We're live on Northeast Streaming Sports. We're simulcasting on Let's Talk Sports as well as our TGI Sports Talk Facebook page. We're happy to have you all with us tonight. We'll get into all the college football news. Not as much to talk about, but I do want to chat about some coaching news, some portal news, or not, I guess portal news, yes. NIL news that, again, just frustrates the bejesus out of me. We'll get into some college basketball, look at the rankings, take a look around the conferences as we get ready for the meat of the college basketball season. It'll be February soon, guys. Sorry. And we'll be talking about March Madness before you know it. Can't wait. Glad to have you all with us tonight. We certainly welcome your comments and any topics you want to get into. And if we have to jump back and forth, from football to basketball, we'll do it. If I've moved on from football and you join us late, you want to talk about some football, we can do it. That's a great thing about having your own podcast. You can do whatever you want to do. Still winding down college football. It's getting to be like the NFL. It never goes out of season. Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh kills me, by the way. Predictable. He's become so predictable. I mean, is it just me? Or does Jim Harbaugh want to be in the NFL in the worst way? And every time he doesn't get a job offer, he goes slinking back to Michigan. And don't be fooled, guys. Yes, he had a conversation. If you want to call an interview, I don't know if you want to call it that, with the Carolina Panthers. But let's not be fooled. NFL teams are not knocking Jim Harbaugh's door down. They're just not. I read a story this year that he turned down the Vikings last year. He didn't turn down the Vikings. They never offered him a job. Good evening, Augustin. How are you? So Jim Harbaugh, again, he will be back to Michigan again. No big surprise, probably. I did think he'd go. I said on this show and on some of my other shows, he would go if he got offered a job. But he's not getting offered jobs. I'm sorry. Whoever planted the story this year that, he turned down the Minnesota Vikings last year, get your facts straight, guys. That's not true. And I'm sure that some of our, I'm sure some of our Viking followers would be glad to what am I trying to get at here? Would be glad to corroborate that fact that he was not offered this job. So anyway, Jim Harbaugh slinks back to Georgia. I'm sorry, Michigan. Freudian slip there, I guess. Some other news and notes around around the league. Before I get into this NIL story from this kid, from this quarterback, Rashada, who first committed to Miami and then committed to Florida. A few other news and notes, and then we'll talk about that and maybe some other topics. Then we'll move into some basketball. First off, former LSU quarterback Walker Howard has announced his transfer to Ole Miss, and Lane Kiffin will have his next quarterback. We'll see if it works out for Lane Kiffin. He's been very active in the transfer portal since he became the coach of Ole Miss. He's been very successful there as well, and we'll see if he can continue that. Brian Kelly actually had been trying to recruit him to Notre Dame when he was still there. Then he convinced the Lafayette, Louisiana recruit to sign with LSU, but he didn't get a chance to play. He played in just 2 games this year as Jaden Daniels, the transfer from Arizona State, took over the reins of quarterback and did very well. And the backup became Garrett Nussmeier. So we'll see how that works out for Lane Kiffin. He's done very good. He brought in Jackson Dart before 2022. Had an up and down season, and they don't think they may not think he's the way to go this year. So I'm sure there'll be a competition there. And backup Luke Altmaier had already transferred out to Illinois. So Lane needed some quarterback help, and he finds it. And there goes my sound. Anyway. Can we please? I guess it's muted, I guess. All right. Next. TCU. By the way, ESPN, it's not Art Briles that I heard this on ESPN earlier that TCU had hired Arkansas's Art Briles as new offensive coordinator. Art Briles is not in college football and probably won't be for a while after some of the things that went on in Baylor under his watch. But his son, Kendall Briles, who was the offensive coordinator at Arkansas the past few years, he'll take over at TCU, replacing Garrett Riley. Lincoln Riley's brother, who moved on to Clemson to become their offensive coordinator. Briles is thought to be one of the top offensive-minded. He's thought to be one of the up-and-coming offensive coordinators in college football. He's the son of one of the most offensive-minded head coaches in the country, and also joining the staff of another offensive-minded head coach in Sonny Dykes. Sonny Dykes got a lot of work to do, man. They're losing a lot at Arkansas. And it's going to be very interesting to see how he'll be active in the transfer portal, and we'll see how the recruiting class that he's had kind of shakes out going forward. But he'll have a new offensive coordinator this year, as we talked about. Baby Tua, I'll say his name wrong. Taulia Tagovailoa. I can't say these names. I'm going to be totally politically incorrect. I guess I need more Simpson Jones. But Baby Tua has announced he will return for the 2023 season to Maryland. So Maryland gets their number 1 quarterback back. His brother's saga in the NFL is well known, and who knows what his future holds with the injuries that he's had throughout his career, both at Alabama and Miami. Hopefully his younger brother can continue to get better. He was second team All Big Ten last year, did throw for 18 touchdowns and over 3,000 yards in a decent season for Maryland. The Senior Bowl's coming up, which I think is always pretty interesting, and we'll report on that coming up at some point. Interesting this year, in every year past that I can remember, full NFL staffs have coached the 2 teams. The East, what are they? Trying to think of whether it's North and South or East and West. Doesn't really matter. But there would be the head coach and their staffs would be there and coach these teams. This year, the game's going a different way, and Chicago Bears offensive coordinator Luke Getsy and Las Vegas defensive coordinator Patrick Graham will serve as Senior Bowl head coaches, and they'll bring in their own coaches to do this. So you won't have full NFL coaching staffs at the Senior Bowl this year. And we'll talk more about some of the participants coming up and how they look. That game will be on February 4th. Always an interesting week, I think, as you're looking ahead to the NFL draft and some of the things that come out of there. That's why it was always thought that these coaching staffs got a head start on the draft and had a leg up on some of the competition. But apparently the NFL is not looking to continue to go that way. CA, good evening. Good to have you with us here tonight. Haven't talked about darts in a while. Just kidding. Yes, good call there, Rick. I had this notated. I was going to talk about it when we moved to basketball. We can certainly touch on it now. Former Villanova star, led Villanova to the Final Four in, I want to say, 1971, and became a pretty big star in the NBA with the Pistons and the Celtics. He was a head coach with the Celtics and some others. Won 2 NBA championships, I believe, with the Celtics. He passed away today. I want to say I don't want to give his age. We'll talk about it. Let me see if I can find it here quickly. Got out ahead of me. Well, we'll find it after. But again, rest in peace. Excuse me, Chris Ford, and our thoughts and prayers go out to your family. And good evening, Rick. Good to have you with us. Rick's got his age for me. Thank you. 74 years old. Way too young, And Rick, I know you're a little bit older than me, and I'm sure you think the same way. And I think we all think the same way. There was a time I thought 74 was ancient. Now, when I see people pass at 74, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing math and it stinks. So Godspeed to Chris Ford, a really good NBA player, a great college basketball player. We talk about these distinctions all the time, right? I really believe your success in the pros, whether we're talking about the football or basketball, does not diminish things you may have accomplished at the college level. And Chris Ford was a great college player. And getting a Villanova team who was not necessarily well, they're still not a college power, but they've certainly won many national championships, 3, since 1971. But getting to the Final Four in 1971 was a big deal at that point, for sure. Nordic Dart Championship start Friday. CA, our resident dart expert, keeps us up to date there. I got to tell you, since you and I started talking darts a little bit, and I don't want to get off topic too far here, CA, I downloaded a dart app on my phone, and it's addicting, I have to tell you. So I keep playing that, trying to keep myself out of trouble. Let's see, what else did I want to chat about here, guys? Anything else in the news you want to chat about? Do not hesitate to bring it up. Sadly, and I know the strike's home for Rick, who's a Georgia fan. Georgia football player Devin Wilcock was killed along with a staffer. I was trying to find her name here. Chandler LaCroix died in a car accident. Sadly, I think this past weekend it was. Kind of bringing everything into perspective for the Georgia family, and our condolences go out to his family and his teammates and the Georgia program, because I know this has got to be a tough time for them, and we do wish them all the best for sure. There were 2 other people in the car, and they did survive with minimal injuries, I suppose. So not a lot of good news, man, in the world of college sports this week. And we'll get into a really bad story here in a little bit when we talk some basketball. Michigan's co-offensive coordinator Matt Weiss was put on leave, according to the athletic department, as the league, or I should say the NCAA, is still investigating report of computer access crimes that occurred in December at the team's facilities. There's it's funny, the world has gotten so complicated. The way guys try to cheat these days is a little bit different, for sure. By the way, this is a guy you talk about the coordinators. This guy's making nearly $1 million a year as a coordinator in a college football. That's you remember when the coaches weren't even making $100,000, for crying out loud. And the last story I'm going to talk about real quick, and it ties together what I want to talk about on the NIL. This story with Jaden Rashada, is just getting more bizarre by the moment. He originally committed to the Miami Hurricanes, go you, with a reported $9 million NIL deal in place. And then mysteriously or not, decided to renege on that commitment to Miami and move to Florida and coach Billy Napier's Gators, where he was, interestingly enough, tied to a $13 million NIL deal. This is exactly the kind of stuff that I keep railing about that should not be happening in college sports. I mean, this kid, I don't know who's who's advising this kid, but my good Lord. I mean, this all happened within the course of, I don't know, a month, 6 weeks. Trying to remember when this whole Miami thing came down. I'm trying to find it in this story here. Now, there's a whole timeline, which I suppose I could find, but I don't want to go through the timeline. The point of this story is that it's ridiculous. How are these kids supposed to be able to? They can't manage their own lives. They can't keep their schedules straight for school. They can't. They need help and tutoring in school. The planning part of your brain doesn't form until you're like 27 years old, and we're giving these kids $9 million before they ever hit school. College, $13 million. So now they're making decisions based on the money that's available to them. And now he has nothing. He has no school. He has no NIL deal. I'm sure he'll have one. The Gator Collective is an independent fundraising arm. Independent. Love it. That disperses money to student athletes in all sports. Financial backing fell through, however, and the Gator Collective terminated the binding agreement, and the kid decides to leave. So this is how we're picking schools. Man, it's just gotten ridiculous, right? CAA and the gaming app, they're addictive too, man. I sit there and play. Here I am playing a dark game on my phone, watching ball games all the time. Dan Harris from Let's Talk Sports stopping in. Good to have you, Dan, and we do appreciate that support. And thank you again for last week's giveaways. Rick Sherlock, who won last week, is with us tonight. Dan, if you don't know, is the founder of Let's Talk Sports, where we're simulcasting this show and other content that I supply goes to Northeast Streaming Sports and Let's Talk Sports. And you can find us there and so many other places I mentioned at the top. And we do appreciate our affiliation with Dan. And we do hope that we get Dan back on the Let's Talk New York Sports show that he and I started doing together almost 2 years ago now. Hard to believe. So, Dan, it's great to have you with us tonight. Great to have you with us. I think I said that twice. Also, I can guess that someone that values $1 or whatever. Yeah, that would be what I guess because, he's getting a little piece of the pie, Dan. And it's a great way to determine how kids should be pursuing their education. And even if it's just pursuing their dreams of professional career, this is the way we're going to do it. Gosh, it's just so frustrating. And these stories seem to get worse every time I see them. Oh, boy. I think he was a 7th rated quarterback in this last recruiting class. As we know, there's some big names in this recruiting class, including Arch Manning. CA's about to watch some hockey on TNT, Islanders and Bruins. I ain't your fan here, my friend. Good luck with that. Oh, my God. What else did I want to talk about tonight in college football? You guys got any topics you want to jump in here with? Do that. I wanted to look at ESPN had an article that I saw today with some college football coaches making 7 predictions for 2023. And I thought we'd take a look at them, see if we agree or disagree. And we'll get into some portal and from Chatter as well. Their first prediction. So this is a consensus, I believe, of coaches. Let me just see if I can. Let's see. I guess it's just a collaboration of coaches and questions that were asked. So some of the things that we talked about, Georgia will certainly pursue a third straight championship. So these are some of the things we're looking for. These aren't necessarily predictions. USC quarterback Caleb Williams will try to become the first back-to-back Heisman winner next year since Archie Griffin in 74-75. Still, in my mind, one of the top college football players of all time. Perhaps there's another TCU. Who will be next year's TCU? We don't really know. It's got to be a team, and we talked about this a little last week. It's got to be a team pegged for the bottom half of its league and defy the odds. We got realignment starting next year with 4 new teams hitting the Big 12 and 2 getting ready to leave the following year. So there'll certainly be no shortage of stories. And here's some of these stories that these coaches, I think there's 6 or 7 of these. We'll talk about them as warranted. The first thing that came up, and I agree with this one, I think I've talked about it a couple of times so far. Florida State will push Clemson in the ACC. Clemson is now, again, it's not I'm not saying they're a bad football team, but they've kind of come back to the pack in the ACC and away from the top echelon, if you will. And Florida State, this was a big year for Mike Norvell. He needed to save his job. He needed a good year to save his job. They got 10 wins. First time since 2016, they got 10 wins. And they return a lot of key players, including their number 1 quarterback, Jordan Travis, the running back, Trey Benson, a defensive end, Jared Versay, who actually transferred from right here down the street, across the river, Albany State University. Was a really, really good player there, and he played very good football last year for Florida State. And he's projected as a first-round draft pick now when he does declare, probably after next season. Wide receiver Johnny Wilson was another that they added through the portal last year, and this is before they actually, really get going in the portal. And Florida State, I think this is a good prediction. I do think Florida State will push Clemson and probably get to the top part of that league. I will tell you that I don't think that the league is going to be overall as strong as it's been in the past. Wake Forest will probably take a step back. North Carolina State could be looking at a step back, as will some of the other teams there. And hopefully Miami will be one of the teams on the rise, but we'll see how that goes. Oh, let's see what we got here. Rick Sherlock. He can pay someone to do his homework now. But he actually can't pay anybody to do his homework now because he doesn't have any money if we're still talking about the Florida kid. Jeez. Because he's got nothing. Right now, he's got nothing. FSU CA is agreeing with this prediction. I do too. I think Mike Norvell now is over the hump. I think the pressure, Florida State's a place where the pressure can be, hard to withstand. I mean, you're living in the shadow of one of the greatest coaches of all time in Bobby Bowden, and then one of the greatest overrated coaches of all time in Jimbo Fisher. But I think Mike Norvell now is over the hump, and I think we'll have a pretty good year this coming year. Archie is a great play. He played okay. I think he had at least 1,000-yard season when they were playing 14 games still, which is not too bad in the NFL, but he was too small for the NFL. Great college player. And again, as Rick points out here, it's why you can't, I will never put down a kid. Tim Tebow couldn't play in the NFL. People want to say he was blackballed for, Tebowing in the end zone, his religious zealousness. It's not a fact. If the kid could have played quarterback in the NFL, he'd been playing. But he's a great college player, one of the greatest college players of all time, along with Archie Manning, along with Jim Brown. along with Ernie Davis, sticking with the Syracuse theme. So again, I'm never going to demean a kid because he fails in the NFL. And Archie didn't really fail. As Rick said, he was just okay. He had a pretty good season. Just too small to play in the NFL, at least at that time, his game. And he wasn't fast. Archie was just a tough kid and played really well, and he was a great college player, as we said. Duke on the rise. That's a good one. CA in college in the ACC. We'll take a quick look at the ACC while we're chatting about this, I guess. Let me go here and get to the standings here, the ACC. Since we're talking about this specific conference, let's go through these. I'm going to say up or down next year for these teams. Clemson, I'm going to say status quo. I know I'll say his name wrong too, because Klubchak will play really well at quarterback once he gets his feet under him. Didn't play well against Tennessee. Did play really well in the ACC championship game against North Carolina. Moving DJU to decide to transfer out. But I'll say they'll be flat. Florida State on the rise. Syracuse, I'm not sure what to think of Syracuse. Let's say best case scenario, they stay flat. Louisville on the rise. Great move getting Jeff Brom as their head coach. North Carolina State, I think, takes a step back with Leary, who we'll talk about in a little bit, or Leary, we'll talk about in a little bit, going to Kentucky, I believe. Wake Forest losing Sam Hartman. Really the heart of that offense. Now we'll see whether he was a system kind of guy once he gets to Notre Dame. But I think Wake Forest probably is going to take a little step back. We'll talk to at a later date. We'll talk about our good friend Larry Sorensen about that. Boston College, they better be on the rise or they'll be looking for a new head coach. North Carolina, you know what? I think this team, I'm going to say, is on the rise. Pittsburgh, I think, might stay flat. Duke on the rise. Good call, CA. I think Georgia Tech could be on the rise. I think Miami could be on the rise. Virginia, a lot of issues there that aren't football related and no fault of the team or the coaches. We'll see how they respond next year to this year's tragedy and their season ending early. And Virginia Tech, long way to go to rebuild that program. So there you have my comments on the up. Not sure who you mean, but yes, I think again, the ACC is a really competitive league, and I think it will be again. I think there'll be 3 or 4 teams in the Central the Coastal rather that will compete for the championship, and I think there'll be 3 in the Atlantic. As I think Louisville will really take a step forward under Jeff Brown. Wake, we'll see. We're going to find out whether Sam Hartman was a product of that system or a really good college quarterback. I kind of think it's in between somewhere. And Wake could reload. Again, this division is tough. So it's going to be very difficult for them. 3-5 last year, 8-5 overall. Not so sure that Wake is going to continue, but we'll see. And again, we'll be rooting for them a little bit. Again, PMU fans, we can't root for them all the time. Georgia Tech, listen, they had a pretty good second half of the season. They finished 4-4 in the league, 5-7 overall after firing Jeff Collins and bringing in. Oh, excuse me. Got to find my. I don't remember the kid's name. I got to find his. I got to find out who's the coach is here because I can't remember his name. It played very well for him. Brent Key. He was the interim coach. They brought him in, kept him full time. Again, do I think they're going to compete for this league next year? No, but I'm not so sure they need a complete overhaul. As the team played much better for Brent Key. Again, like every other school, things can change so fast now with the transfer portal. For good or bad, we'll see how that pans out for them. Let's go on to the next prediction. You guys can go back to this if you want. Big 12 will be wide open and challenging for new members. Very unpredictable league, right? In 2022. I think that'll stay the same next year. I don't think you can really sit here and predict who will win this. It's going to be very tough for TCU unless Sonny Dykes has a tremendous transfer portal season. He's got to replace the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy in Max Duggan. He's got to replace one of his top receivers in Quentin Johnston. Cornerback Travarius Hodges-Tomlinson, LaDaniel Thomason's nephew, I want to say. And their top running back, Kendre Miller, out, all gone, graduated somewhere into the NFL, most likely all of them in one shape or another. So you can count on them struggling. Kansas State will return more than the Horned Frogs will, and they're the defending champions, don't forget. But they will miss Deuce Vaughn for sure, and certainly their top wide receiver, Malik Knowles, will be out of there as well. So, again, K-State could be taking a step back. A lot of the coaches thought Texas was the most talented team in the Big 12, and I wouldn't argue that. I think coaching might be the problem there. I mean, they're just 13-12 under Steve Scarsazian. This is a big year coming up for Steve Scarsazian, and he's going to have some issues that he's got to work through. He lost his star running back, Bijan Robinson. He's going to end up with a quarterback competition, if not a controversy, on his hands with Quinn Ewers, who was the starter for much of the year when he wasn't hurt, at least. An incoming freshman, highly touted Arch Manning. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he navigates this. I mean, one of the Big 12 defensive assistants said straight out, they will have a quarterback controversy. Coaches do expect Oklahoma to improve in year two. And they have to. They're 6-7 last year. They do bring back their number one quarterback. I just, again, underperformance is all I can say. Brent Venable, people want to give him a pass, and I don't think Alan Perales is with us tonight. He talks all things Oklahoma. He's got a new show on Let's Talk Sports, talking all things Oklahoma sports. In Oklahoma, not just Oklahoma, but Oklahoma State and any of the other schools in Oklahoma he will talk about in any sport. So again, Kansas, I don't know. I mean, they've got a great coach. We're going to see whether they can continue the momentum that they were building last year. They do return their quarterback, Jalen Daniels, who was certainly a breakthrough player for them last year, at least early in the season. And you've got 4 new members coming in, as we said, BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston. So it's going to be, a bit of a rocky transition here. We'll see how these teams can do. BYU, I really think, is probably built, and maybe UCF, is probably built to have the most success early on. Cincinnati and Houston. Houston had a disappointing season last year. Cincinnati had, I think, a surprising season with everything they lost from their playoff team 2 years ago. Now they've lost their head coach, Luke Fickell. We'll see whether they can be a player in the first year in the Big 12. We'll see how that works out. What do we got here? UT wins the conference championship. I wouldn't be shocked to see that. And I'll be honest with you, CA, they need, Steve Scarsazian needs this season to be that type of season if he's going to keep his job. One of the other things they said, we'll see a very different Wisconsin offense, which I'm very sure of. I mean, Wisconsin has made some decisions this year that's atypical for this program. They parted ways and fired a steady, successful coach in Paul Chryst, which they normally don't do. Guys are usually who are successful and steady, usually stay quite a while there. And they took a big swing and took Luke Fickell from Cincinnati. And then they mutually decided Fickell and Jim Leonard, who was the interim coach, who many thought was going to get this job, they decided to be best if he moved on. He did hire a new offensive coordinator in Phil Longo. So this is going to be a little different scheme than Wisconsin and Big Ten fans in general have seen out in that western part of the Big Ten. We'll see what kind of difference that makes next year. It'll be a more exciting brand of football than you're used to seeing at Wisconsin and most of those schools in the West. Maybe I'm being unfair because Purdue plays exciting brand of offensive football. Minnesota can at times. I get myself pigeonholed with the Wisconsin, the Iowas in that division. So we'll see whether I think Luke Fickell will have a big influence on this team here in year one. What do we got here? The Mad New Yorker joins us. Good evening, Carlos. That schedule release will be crazy for the Big 12. It will be. Again, 14 teams this first year, back to 12. Wait a minute. Yeah. Wait a minute. They got 12. So what do they have? 16 teams? Why am I having trouble with the math here today? Big 12. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. They got 11? 2, 4, 6, 8. They got 10 teams right now. So they'll be back to the Big 12 in 2 years when Texas and Oklahoma leave. That's what I thought. It will be crazy, though. Wisconsin making some huge moves, as we just talked about. It'll be very interesting to see how they hash out in that style of play changing and how teams in the Big Ten. You know what? But the Big Ten, there are still a lot of teams that play a stodgy, for lack of a better word, offense, but not all of them. Ohio State's, gone to the spread offense. Michigan does it from time to time, not as with the success that Ohio State. Obviously, they still want to run the football. Iowa's still Iowa. But some of these schools, the Illinois, the Purdue's, the Minnesotas, they've opened it up a little bit, and they know that's if they're going to compete with the SEC teams, they're going to have to do that going forward, because ground and pound will not win national championships anymore. Wisconsin, 2 yards in a cloud of dust has been their reputation, Rick, for sure. About to change with a new regime. Luke Fickell and Phil Longo in charge of that offense. Is he covering women's softball? He might. He might. His promos say he'll cover anything in Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma, sports-wise. So, again, I'm not going to ask him field hockey questions, but what's the next prediction they had here? I'll get into that in a second. We just talked about Venable. Deion Sanders will upgrade Colorado, but growth will be gradual. I've said this all along. Do not expect Colorado to turn around and compete for a Pac-12 championship next year. It's just not, although he's been very successful already in the transfer portal. Colorado arguably is the worst Power 5 team in the country before Deion gets there. If he gets this team to 500 in the league and 500 overall, I think he'd be doing very well. So I think some people have exaggerated expectations for this team. Now, again, he brought his highly rated recruit cornerback Travis Hunter with him from Jackson State. He also got a quarterback Shadur Sanders, I believe is his last name. I don't see it here in front of me. He's an air raid type quarterback. And I think, it'll be a more exciting team to play. You got a new offensive coordinator, and the Kent State head coach steps down to be the offensive coordinator. So that it tells you something about the cachet that Deion has after just a couple of years in NCAA Division I football. He'll make a difference there. But again, this team's not going to compete next year when you're talking about USC being better, Washington being better, Oregon being Oregon, Utah. They all return their quarterbacks too. Michael Penix for Washington, Bo Nix for Oregon. Cam Rising for Utah, all returning next year. It's going to be a tough go for Colorado. They get to 500. I think they have done very well. The style doesn't always help these schools. I think we're still back to the Big Ten here, right? It's the coaches for the next level why these kids go to these schools. Keep talking about that, Carlos. You're not wrong that the kids choose. Kids choose to go to school for all the wrong reasons today anyway. We just talked about that at the top of the show with the kid from Florida who goes to Miami because of a $9 million promise from their NIL. What's the word again? The conglomerate. It's not conglomerate. He'll come to me in a minute. And then he leaves to get $4 million extra from Florida. And then when the money gets pulled because they couldn't raise it, or whatever reason, now he's gone. He says, I'm out of here. Now he has no school. These kids don't make good decisions. And it's not, you guys need to remember, if you think Nick Saban's making $12 million a year and these guys are making all this money because of getting kids to the next level, you're wrong. It's about winning games in college, putting fannies in the seat and getting them big TV contracts. That's what gets them the money. Nothing to do with the NFL whatsoever. Now, kids will decide to go there because they think a coach can get them to the NFL. That helps recruiting. I don't disagree with that at all. But if kids at 18 years old, 17 years old are picking coaches because they want to get to the NFL, how about just getting to school, learning about life? How about learning about life, the way sports and big time sports has a way to teach you how to live your life and do the right things going forward? How about I'm starting to sound like a preacher here. Forward. How about that? How about maybe that? How about just we do something simple that makes common sense like that? Alan, I don't think Alan's here. I did see a cow tipping comment in our group chat the other day. Cow tipping I don't know if it's an actual sport. If it's a real sport, you'll know. Go look on DraftKings and see if we can get a bet in tonight, Rick. Who are we talking about? His son? Oh, Dion, his son. All right. Well, again, I don't think his son's putting him over the top either. Nice player. If we're talking about Dion's son and Colorado's chances, I don't think that's going to, again, change my opinion whatsoever. Will this be the worst Power 5 team in college football next year? Probably not. They'll probably be much improved. But much improved would be 500 in the conference and in their overall standing. CA, we love college softball and the girls as well, and as the boys race to Omaha. Good point. Listen, I got to tell you, I see as much coverage on ESPN for the girls softball World Series. I think that's what they call it, right? The college softball World Series, I think, CA, as I do for the guys. And we'll jump into that in the spring on this show. I'd like to make sure that we cover that more than we did this year, and we'll get Larry Sorensen on to talk about ACC baseball. Well, making a bowl game is not. Well, first of all, so you're saying, well, this is a little unclear. Let me see if I can clarify this at all, Carlos. So you're saying Colorado will make a bowl game, which I don't disagree with, because all you got to do is be 500 in your FBS games and you make a bowl game. 82 or 84 teams make bowl games. That's not such a big deal. Now it is when you're the worst team in FBS Power 5 programs. But you're saying not the playoffs, but you're saying they get a random bowl game. I get that. Yes. Can I see them playing in the whatever, the Idaho Potato Bowl? Yeah. Can I see them playing in the Barstool Arizona Bowl or whichever bowl game they sponsored last year? I think I got that right. Yeah, they'll make a bowl game. And that'd be a good step up for them. That's a good building block. And I do think that Dion, if he stays long enough, I don't know what Deion's grand scheme is. Does he want to coach in the NFL? You watch him, and I watched on Amazon. They've got a really good quick miniseries. I think it's only 3 or 4 episodes. Coach Prime. I think this kid wants to work with kids. I don't think he wants to coach in the pros. I know there's some conversation about that, but I personally don't think he does. I think he took this job because he saw with Mike Norvell winning 10 games at Florida State this past year, he was not going to have a path to that job for some time, probably. You know what? Texas A&M better win. So number 1, find a quarterback. And number 2, you know, you got to beat Alabama. You got to beat the best teams in the SEC. And what's win? I mean, what is going to be success? And it's not just Texas A&M with the NIL players. We just talked about $13 million that Florida initially offered this kid to come to Florida, and Miami $9 million. And none of these programs are winning, by the way. So as we've talked about, Carlos, I think you and I, you know, maybe this whole NIL thing will police itself because people aren't going to get ROI on their investments, and that might be what's happened here in this $13 million deal that got pulled back from this kid. That some of these boosters are saying, I'm not getting my money's worth in these deals, and I'm out. We'll see. But Texas A&M, Jimbo either wins. Again, probably can't fire him. It's going to hurt his recruiting, number 1. Forget about the NIL. I know you're going to tell me that's why the kids are coming there. And that's why he gets a number 1, number 2 recruiting class in the country every year. But eventually you need to win games. And his buyout won't save him forever. It'll probably save him for a couple more years. Because, again, nobody's paying a coach $86 million this year to go away, $74 million a year next year to go away. Maybe when he gets down into the 40s or 50, they'll say goodbye. But until then, A&M is stuck with Jimbo Fisher and whatever results he can bring. Now, they did make him go out and hire an offensive coordinator, so he will not be the play caller this year. So maybe they can improve because they'll have a better handle on helping kids succeed, putting them in a position to succeed. That's what good coaches do. I may have participated in this sport at near Alfie Merrick's house. Yeah, there was some cow tipping to be done in Perth for sure, as we had there was quite a few cows running around Perth and Fulton County in general in those days, Rick. So if that, and I don't think the Merricks own that house anymore, right? But I certainly know the area very well that you're talking about, as I grew up not too far from that, mile or 2. Miami and Texas, put Florida in there, right? Find a 4th team. Maybe it's Brian Kelly at LSU. We need a 4th team so we can have a playoff. Miami, Texas A&M. We've got 2 more teams to play off for that bowl title. NIL Team of the Year. You lose and you win. How about this one, Rick? You're going to like this one. The coaches polled believe that Georgia will widen the gap with the rest of the SEC competition. They have, as I said on this show a bunch of times, they have established themselves as a preeminent program, as the nation's preeminent program now. They're above Alabama. At worst, they're 1-1A. But, I mean, who can catch them? How are they going to catch up? Tennessee took a nice jump under Josh Heupel, but, you know, they lose their best quarterback. They lose their best wide receiver, one of their best wide receivers, and a bunch of other standouts from this dynamic offense. Is Milton going to be the answer there? I don't know. He played well against Clemson. We'll see whether in the Orange Bowl, we'll see whether he can continue, but I'm not so sure that Tennessee is going to continue to rise the way they did here in year 2 under Josh Heupel. They'll probably level out a little bit. We'll see about that. Sorry, Carlos. I know you're loving a Rocky Top. South Carolina has got some momentum with Shane Beamer, as I've talked about a bunch here. Spencer Rattler, who early in the year, this looked like a joke that they brought him in here through the transfer portal. He played really well down the stretch. He played really well against Notre Dame in a losing effort. It'll be interesting to see if South Carolina can continue that. But are they going to get to Georgia's level? Probably never. I mean, their biggest challenge is going to come from the other division, Alabama and LSU most likely. LSU had a great year. I think a great year considering the expectations in Brian Kelly's first year. So they're going to get better. But the problem with Brian Kelly is he's got now he's got a reputation for not being able to win the big games. We'll see whether that stands up or not. Alabama's Alabama. Alabama will be back. They've got to replace some really good players, not least of which is Bryce Young and certainly Will Anderson. So we'll see what happens. But LSU's got Jaden Daniels back, and they've got a team that I don't think they lose a ton of their talent, and they should continue to get better. And to Texas's point, to Carlos's point about Texas A&M, the coaches are intrigued with them. I want to read this here a little bit. SEC coaches who faced Texas A&M said the defensive front could stack up with Georgia in the league's best. They thought freshman quarterback Connor Wiggum, who emerged late last season as the team's best option to lead the offense, but the Aggies' portal departures could be significant. And Jimbo Fisher, they talk about him hiring Bobby Petrino, as I said, as offensive coordinator. You know, it's good that he got the play calling off his shoulders as he was pretty much forced to do. But Bobby Petrino is certainly he's a boomer bust kind of guy, I think. He could be a huge hit here, or he could be a complete disaster as he was at Arkansas as head coach and even the second time around at Louisville. So we'll see how that goes. Let's see, we're missing a few. Number 3 recruiting class, and you guys got to give me a little. We're talking about Texas A&M, I guess, Carlos? Because remember, it's a little while before I get your guys' comments. So if you can give me a little context, it helps me. But I'm assuming you're talking about Texas A&M. I'm not sure. Problem with Georgia? Well, yeah, they lost 15 last year to the NFL draft. I don't see it being a problem. I did last year. Now I'm a believer. I'm a convert, Rick. So they lose 8 players. They put 8 new players in there and replace them. Now, the biggest loss they have is Stetson Bennett, in my mind. Again, underrated. Getting a bit of a backlash for using a cell phone during a parade they had for the national championship. I mean, good grief. Anyway, whatever. I think Stetson Bennett will be harder to replace than they think. But I do think Georgia proved to me. They lost 15 guys last year, and I said, you can't possibly play as well as you did. And this team, by the end of the year, was maybe as good as the team the year before. At least record-wise, they were better. So I'm not writing them off. I did last year, and I will not do it again. I didn't say they'd have a bad year, but I said they wouldn't make the playoff, and I was wrong, obviously. I will not make that mistake again. I will tell you that Georgia will reload. They don't need to rebuild. Rick following that up with Georgia lost lots again this year, and again, exactly. They seem to be able to reload. That's 23 players, most likely. I don't know if all 8 of these guys will get drafted. We'll find out. 23 guys in 2 years in the NFL. Unheard of. And being able to reload and continue your success despite that. Can a new quarterback lead Georgia? But there you go. It is a free. But you know what? Here's the thing. Stetson Bennett, they'll find somebody talent-wise easily to replace Stetson Bennett. So this will make your head explode, Carlos. And Rick, I know you'll be right behind me on this statement. What they need to replace is Stetson Bennett's leadership. on the field. That's not as easy to replace as talent. There's 100 guys in quarterbacks in college football more talented than Stetson Bennett. But last year, there weren't any quarterbacks better, despite him not winning the Heisman Trophy. Y'all are all over the place now. Washington's on the rise. Yes, agreed. Coach DeBoer's done a great job there rebuilding this team. Michael Penix coming back next year. He'll be an early Heisman favorite. And I think Washington, and I think I said this last week or either on this show or one of my shows, that I think Washington will be my favorite to win the Pac-12 next year and be an outside contender for a playoff spot next year. They had a great year this year. They did a great job in their bowl game. I'm trying to remember what they played now. It'll come to me. Somebody will let me know. But they played great in their bowl game. They had a hiccup against UCLA. One other hiccup. I think this team is really, really good and ready to step up. Look at Petrino, and it's with a E, not an A, just for your future reference, Carlos. Because you know me, I'm the English police. Not. Bobby Petrino, he's you talk about mercurial personalities. You know, he had a quick rise from Louisville to head coach in the NFL to quitting after 14 games, 15, I think. Jumping to Arkansas, back into college, getting in trouble in a motorcycle accident with one of the female, not sure what her role was with the show, maybe trainer, I don't remember, physical therapist, whatever she was, but much younger than Bobby. Led to his demise there. Went back to Louisville, didn't work out, can't go home again most often. So it remains to be seen whether this will be a good hire or a bad hire for Jimbo. And it may be an important hire for his future. Oh, you're talking about Georgia's draft. Well, again, that's why they reload, right? 2 or 3 in the country again every year. The difference between Georgia and Texas A&M is, Kirby Smart wins, while Jimbo Fisher lives on the reputation of his national championship 8 years ago now at a different school. Well, you're right. They can't help but be better. But, the problem is, unlike Colorado, the expectation is not to get to 500. The expectation is to compete for SEC championships. That's why he's one of the highest paid coaches in the country. Speaking of Washington, Mickey was around for a couple times. I don't know. Maybe he goes to bed early. I don't know. He messaged me a couple times about some things. So he's around, and I think he's doing okay, but he hasn't popped into the show. He might forget here and there. But he's popped in a couple of times, Rick. I think, you're here most weeks. Maybe it's just 1 week he was here. I kind of asked him where he'd been, make sure he was all right. I messaged him. I know he had a bout with COVID, and he had some things going on, I think, but he did pop in 1 week, and then I haven't seen him since. So hopefully Mickey's doing well. Mickey Delaney, for those of you who know who we're talking about, one of our last year, he was one of our fun followers. We had a lot of fun with Mickey talking about Washington State football. See, I still love that. It's funny. Texas A&M can be nothing but better. You're absolutely right. But again, gosh, the problem is, I listen. I'm not a Jimbo Fisher fan, as you've probably been able to tell watching the show. Prediction. I think this might be one of the last ones. This is the last one. Ohio State has lost its grip on the Big Ten. From 2002 to 2020, they won or shared 11 conference titles. They've lost the last 2. They dominated Michigan, right? Through all of Jim Harbaugh's tenure until 2 years ago. And ironically, I think Ohio State is probably the second best team in the country this year. They certainly picked a horrible time to play their worst game of the year against Michigan. And they picked a horrible time to play their best game of the year against Georgia because they were playing the best team in the country. If that kid makes the field goal, Ohio State wins the national championship. There's no doubt in my mind Ohio State has their way with TCU. None. 65-7? Probably not. But has Ohio State lost their edge? Michigan's already caught up with them. Penn State's gotten better. Now, again, the Penn State fans, I've been ragging on them in some of their groups because after they won the Rose Bowl and Ohio State and Michigan get beat, they were calling themselves the best team in the Big Ten. You got to beat Michigan and Ohio State to call yourself the best team in the Big Ten. So are they ready for a breakthrough? I've been waiting for it for James Franklin for like 10 years. How long has he been there? He's been there quite a while now. That might be a little high. I mean, the team goes 11-2. Who'd they lose to? But some of these teams will get better. Wisconsin's going to get better. Nebraska's going to get better. Again, similar to Colorado, Matt Rule's job at Nebraska, he'll be solid there. He'll have some time to rebuild this program the right way. They'll be better next year. And again, 500 record in the Big Ten would be an awesome step for Matt Rule. So there's going to be a lot of teams, I think, making their way up in the Big Ten, not just Michigan, not just Ohio State. As much as I want to bash James Franklin and Penn State, they'll be a contender next year. Wisconsin, I think, will rebound quickly under Luke Fickell. A couple of years from now, we'll be talking about Nebraska. You got UCLA and USC coming into the league in 2 years. With you leaning back. Oh, you can't see that because my, what do you call it? I should get my U up here. I'm a little warm. I should have worn the lighter weight, dark one that I have. Oklahoma and A&M were both preseason top 5 last year. Texas wasn't top 25. So how the expectations have changed. Well, there's always expectations at Texas, right? I want to see something here because see if I can find this. I don't know where I saw this. If I can find it, I'll share it with you guys real quick. There was a comparison. Damn, I don't know where I saw this. There was a comparison between the rankings, the final rankings, and the preseason rankings. I'm telling you, half the top 25 wasn't ranked in the top 25 the way it ended before the season started. Let's see if I can find this quick. You guys talk amongst yourselves. Hold on. Let me see if I can find this. I'm going to get into my portal conversation next week because I want to talk a little college basketball before we get done here tonight. Let me just see if I can find this article here somewhere. Georgia leaves the worst TCU, best of the bowls. Damn. I just saw this afternoon, too. I guess I'm not going to find it. So it always happens. When I want to find something, then I go and it's gone. Top 75 teams, way too early. Risers. Nah, I've lost it. But anyway, it's very interesting. I would swear what I saw, and I looked at it quickly, but probably half of the top 25 wasn't ranked in the top 25 before the season started. So I think the teams that were in the top five, Ohio State was in the top five, finished in the top five. Georgia was ranked in the top five, I believe, finished in the top five. Alabama, where'd they finish? Let's see. Where did Alabama finish? I think they finished top five, right? I wish they'd show me in my normal poll ranking here. Top five, Alabama. Let's go through this quick. Texas, unranked. Fresno State, unranked. South Carolina, unranked. I'm just doing this by my own. Pittsburgh, I'm unsure about. UCLA, unranked. Mississippi State, unranked. Troy, unranked. Oregon State, unranked. LSU, unranked. Kansas State, I want to say unranked. Florida State, unranked. Tulane, unranked. Washington, unranked. TCU, we know, unranked. That's 13 right there. A couple of them I'm unsure, I'm guessing a little bit, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty close. So as far as Texas is, I don't know that the expectations have changed yet that much, at least not in Texas. Maybe you remember, these polls aren't just taking people in Texas. The expectations in Texas are always higher than they ought to be, which is why they've had trouble getting his programs righted for a long time. They make reaches for coaches. They make reaches for players. Now, Scarsation's got one of the better ranked recruiting classes coming in. The fact remains he's 13-12. And that's not going to cut it for long in Texas. Look at all the guys who had a short string. Charlie Strong had a very short string. Tom Herman, who had a really good track record coming in here, much better than Charlie Strong, very short leash. Texas just needs to kind of get it together. Let's jump into, and I'll come back here if you guys want to talk more college football. We're going to keep talking football. We're going to talk some basketball. I want to get some notes in on, we're still on college football. What's up with that? College football huddle. We swing around college football. No, we don't. Going around college basketball. Come, I can't find it. I guess I don't have. I probably don't have a banner. There we go. Let's just do this. College basketball chatter. A lot of fun stuff going on in college basketball and some not fun stuff. I mean, unfortunately, the top story of the week this year, we'll get into the basketball itself, but this awful story that Alabama has had to deal with. His team, Darius Miles, was involved in a fatal shooting last week. Turns out he didn't do the shooting, but he supplied the gun that did do the shooting. He's charged with capital murder, as is the person who pulled the trigger. There was a young woman that was killed, and this is right near the university campus, by the way. Miles was a reserve forward, I believe, on this team. Just a sad, sad story. Again, these kids, I don't know how they put themselves in these positions. And Nate Oates, I like Nate Oates as a college basketball coach. I like him as a person, but I think he might have had a little bit of a error in judgment here. And, one of the first people that he reached out to for some guidance of how to deal with his team was Ray Lewis. Nate, what are you thinking about, dude? How is Ray Lewis the guy you go to? I understand the guy's got experience in, homicides, even multiple homicides. But he shouldn't be the guy you go to for advice on how to deal with this within your team and within your program. They did a great job being able to get through this and win in at Vanderbilt, 78-66 the other night. Jerry Stackhouse was upset. The coach of Vanderbilt was upset they even played this game. But, this is the 4th-ranked team in the country, and they've been just demolishing people. So how they handle this going forward is going to be very interesting to see. I just wish Nate Oates had done something different than call Ray Lewis for advice on how to handle this. And I think going forward, I don't think we can judge this by the one game, what effect this will have on the Alabama players and the team. And the important thing is here, a young girl lost her life. Let's not lose sight of that, right? And another young man's future is finished within a blink of an eye. One bad decision. And again, I'm not sure if the story I heard that this happened because she dissed Darius Miles' advances or somehow offended him. First of all, people, let's stop being offended by everything. I'm offended pretty much only by people that are offended by everything. And, I had another point. I don't know what it is, but this is a tragedy that did not have to happen. And several young lives are now ruined, and one is ended. So that's one of the, obviously a story that's not much fun to talk about, but we had to get into it a little bit. Elsewhere around, Dan Hurley is going to miss a game at Seton Hall. He's got COVID-19. There was another game canceled somewhere. I'll say it's tonight. Maybe I'll see it in the news and notes as I'm looking at it. This comes at a bad time for Connecticut as they went from 14-0 to losing 4 of their last 5. UConn have been playing really good basketball, and I'm sure they can right the ship yet. I'm not sure if this is one of the teams that can win the national championship. I'm going to try to give you my take on some teams that can win it before we leave here today. And if we don't get to it, we'll certainly do it next week. But I've got my own thoughts on who I think are the real contenders and who are not. Let's see what else we got here in the world of college basketball. Bill Self takes the blame for missed chances against K-State. If you missed it, K-State lost, I believe, at home in overtime to K-State. Kansas lost to K-State. Number 2, Kansas. Kansas State's been on a rise with a bullet here, guys. But they're not a championship contender. Kansas is. But that's one of the big upsets of this week. Big story. This applies to football and basketball. We talk about the money being made by some of these programs, but there's a lot of money being lost. University of Connecticut, their athletic deficit climbed to $53 million this year. That's why you've got to have TV contracts to compete in the environment that college sports is today. That's why UCLA is going to the Big Ten. They're in debt like $100 million. And they need the big money that comes with going to the Big Ten, which is, I don't know, $60 or $70 million a year just from TV revenue. So it's a different environment. UConn, who has a very successful, basketball program for sure, and plays in the Big East, they just don't have a huge big contract. Certainly not basketball. Basketball doesn't get the contracts that football gets. Elsewhere, it's Northwestern's game with Iowa was suspended, as there's several players, I think, on both teams that have come down with COVID. COVID's still there, guys. Be careful. Ian Jackson, the number two prospect in this year's recruiting class, has picked North Carolina. North Carolina struggling again after they did last year during the regular season, only to make a run to the Final Four under first-year coach Hubert Davis. We'll get to the polls in a second. Houston still at number 1 in the AP poll. Florida Atlantic ranked for the first time. Some of the big stories there. I'm going to get to your comments in just a second as I switch to the poll. And as I go through the poll, I'm going to mention a couple teams that I think will have a chance. And I guess this will be a topic, and I hope to get Alan in here. Top to bottom, the Big 12 is likely the best conference in men's basketball, and we'll talk about that too as we go forward tonight and in the coming weeks. Let's take a quick look at the rankings, and before I do that, I will get to your guys' comments. What do we got here, guys? With me leaning back, I know we looked at that one. I guess I only got a couple. Oh, I only got one. Islanders. I guess I didn't have to hurry to get to that. Islanders up 1-0 against the Bruins first intermission. Good job by the Islanders so far. Bruins the best team in hockey. Tune in Sunday while Jim Beringer back on for another college. I'm sorry, I'm talking college tonight. NHL update. Let's look at the standings. The top and the AP poll we stick with here. The top four remain the same: Houston, Kansas, Purdue, and Alabama. The first place votes have tightened up a little bit: 34 for Houston, 23 for Kansas, 3 for Purdue. UCLA jumps 2 spots to number 5. Gonzaga jumps 2 spots, playing better basketball, but they certainly are not the power in the Western Athletic Conference as they were before. And they'll be moving to the Big 12, don't forget, here soon. Texas still playing really good basketball under their interim coach Terry in the light of Chris Beard getting fired, rightfully so, as we've talked about a couple of times on this show. They move up, I should say, 3 spots to number 7. They're 15-2. Xavier out of the Big East. The Big East, I keep saying this, is not what it was, but it's certainly resurgent and playing much better basketball these last few years. Xavier, after a bad year last year, or down year anyway, is bounced back, 15-3, and they move up 4 spots. Tennessee drops 4 spots after losing a tough game this week. Tennessee is 14-3. They drop 4 spots. Virginia's up 3. Arizona down 2. Iowa State still playing some good basketball. Kansas State, as I said last week, they had a big jump from out of the polls to number 10. Unheard of. They dropped 2 spots after losing a game. They'll move up again next week, though, because since this poll came out, they've beaten Kansas, don't forget. Where am I? Lost my spot. TCU, one of the underranked teams in the country. If you want a sleeper to make the Final Four this year, don't sleep on Jamie Dixon in Texas, or Texas Christian University. Sorry. So up 3 spots, number 14. UConn down 9 after, again, losing 4 out of 5. They've fallen from number 2 in the country to number 15. This team will recover, and they'll be a Final Four contender, I think, before the year is out. I'll give you probably 10 potential contenders that I see. Auburn playing some of their best basketball of the year after getting off to a slow start under Bruce Pearl. They're moved up to 16, up 5 spots. Miami slipping a little, down to number 17, 14-3 overall. Charleston, this is a team that's probably way overranked. They're 18-1. They're now up 4 spots to number 18. Your record says who you are, but this team hasn't beaten a team in a top 100 the entire season. So I'm not sure that, Charleston is anything more than a mirage. Clemson playing some really good basketball in the ACC, up 7 spots to number 19. Marquette, my childhood school, up 5. They're 14-5 now, playing their best basketball of the year in the Big East. Baylor starting to recover after a very, very slow start for them. They're up to 21. Providence drops 3. Rutgers up 3, finally getting into the top 25 here, playing some really good ball in the Big Ten. Watch out for Rutgers, another team to be careful of come Final Four time. But they're not going to be a championship contender. Florida Atlantic, as I mentioned earlier, ranked for the first time ever in basketball, 16-1. And my previous flavor of the year, or last 2 years, Eric Musselman's Arkansas Razorbacks, with some devastating injuries and some devastating losses, have now fallen 10 spots just this week to number 25. teams that fell out this week: Wisconsin, Missouri, San Diego State, and Duke, who's starting to falter a little bit under first-year coach John Shire. Now, of these 25 teams, I have 10. I'm going to give you the teams that I think have a legitimate chance at a national championship. Houston, Kansas, Purdue, and Alabama, no-brainers. UCLA, yes. Not for Gonzaga. Gonzaga's got no chance this year. They're not even a shadow of the team that they've been for the last 5-6 years. So I've got 5. Texas, if they can keep playing the way they are, 6. I say no Xavier. I say no Tennessee. I'm going to say Virginia. Arizona, no. Iowa State, no. Kansas State, no. TCU, I'm going to give a puncher's chance to get there. UConn, I think they're a national championship contender. And I think that, folks, is it. 9 teams. We'll talk more about them as we start to look at some bracketology over the coming weeks. But I think you got 9 teams with a real chance to win this national championship this year. And I do think you'll see some sleepers getting into that Final Four, making a run at that Final Four, just like every other year. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. And maybe as we look at some of the conference standings, we can pull out some of those sleepers. And if you guys have some topics or comments, please feel free to put them up. Where are we here? We got about 9 minutes left. We're going to stick with the major conferences and maybe some of the local teams of interest here. Albany Great Danes are really struggling this year. I do believe their coach will get fired this year. They're 1-4 in the conference, 6-14 overall. In the AAC, Houston is obviously the cream of the crop there. 18-1, 6-0 in the conference. Tulane's playing decent basketball. Is there an outsider here to get to the Final Four? I don't think so. I think Houston's a national championship contender. I do not think you have a sleeper chance here at all for making a run at the Final Four. The A-10, this would be a sleeper team if somebody were to make a run here. Don't sleep on Dayton and don't sleep on VCU this year, I would say. The Atlantic Coast really, we talked about the Atlantic Coast not being as good as they've been in the past. You look at the standings and it looks like they're upside down. Clemson's in first place at 7-1. Miami's in second at 6-2. Wake Forest and Pittsburgh are third and fourth, 6-2, 5-2, respectfully. Now this team will get, a decent number of bids, but there's a lot of disappointments here. North Carolina, who did make a good run last year, off to a 5-3 start in the league, 13-6 overall. Syracuse getting a little bit better. Lost again. They seem to lose the day before this show every week. Maybe we should stop doing the show. Florida State, very big disappointment. Is there an outsider here that can get to the Final Four? Miami. I'll give you a hard pick there. The Big 12, a lot of talk that every one of these teams will make the tournament this year. First time ever. I don't think that'll happen. Because I really don't think Oklahoma State, West Virginia, or Texas Tech have any chance of getting in there. They're not going to be, unless they make a run here, of course. But as we stand right now, again, I firmly believe teams under 500 in their conference shouldn't get in. Now, there will be teams that finish a game or 2 games under 500 that will get in. They could win their conference championship and get an automatic berth, of course. But I think they're going to be set. I think Kansas State, Kansas, Iowa State, Texas, TCU, Baylor, maybe Oklahoma. That's 7 teams. Big Ten will probably do better than that. The outside shot here, I'm going to make it TCU with an outside shot to win the national championship as well. The Big East, Xavier, Providence, Marquette, Creighton playing really good basketball at the moment. UConn, probably 5 sure things. Seton Hall maybe will be on the fence. New coach Shashin Holloway, who had great success in a tournament with St. Peter's last year. St. John's really underperforming. They did beat UConn on the road last weekend. Maybe that'll be the catalyst that they need to really step it up and maybe get to their first NCAA tournament under Mike Anderson. You want an outside shot at a Final Four run here? Marquette Golden Eagles. We'll skip the Big Sky. We'll go to the Big Ten. Purdue in. Rutgers in. Michigan in. Illinois in. Michigan State in. Wisconsin probably in. Iowa, they would have been out. I think they're in now. Could be it. You'll get Ohio State maybe making a run. Maybe Indiana making a run. You might get to 8 or 9 teams. Right now you got 7. You want a sleeper for the Final Four here? Rutgers Scarlet Knights. The Colonial. Let's look at the Colonial, where Charleston is 19-1 now since the poll came out. They're number 18, 7-0 in the conference. Is there somebody that will beat them? The question for them is going to become, if they don't win their conference championship, their tournament, will they get in with an at-large? UC Wilmington's had a good year. They're 5-2, 15-5 overall. Probably the team with the best chance of upsetting them. None of these teams will have any outside shot at the Final Four in my mind. Conference USA, Florida Atlantic, who we talked about. This is a team, watch out. 16 games in a row they've won. The play in this league isn't as bad as you think. Middle Tennessee, Rice, UAB, UTEP, Charlotte. Some decent basketball being played in this conference. Florida State's a team that could make a run in the tournament, should they make it. I think they will get that large if they lose their conference tournament. So be careful. The Ivy League, Princeton and Cornell are going to fight to the wire there. The Metro Atlantic, Siena continues to lead this league over big favorite Iona. Iona and Rick Pitino, big favorites. They should be coming to Albany pretty soon. I got to check this out. I want to get to this game. They will play Iona. I looked at this 127. I got a dinner that night. I might get over to the TU Center for the second half of this game on the 27th, which is next Friday night, I believe. So don't sleep on. Siena gets in the tournament. They always make a little bit of noise. So I think they'll make a run to the Final Four. Absolutely not. But I think Iona, with Rick Pitino, another team, if they make the tournament, could make some noise. Not going to talk about them. Missouri Valley, I'm not going to talk about them. Mountain West, interesting. New Mexico playing very good basketball under Richard Pitino, Rick Pitino's son, who had some middling success at Minnesota before he got let go. Really got out of the gate pretty strong there. He's having really good success at New Mexico this year, 17-2, not far away from being ranked. Beat his dad just a few weeks ago in a game against Iona. But they're in 4th place in this conference. I think the Mountain West could come away with 4 seeds here in the NCAA tournament. San Diego State's really good. Nevada's really good. I think New Mexico gets in unless any of these teams fall in their face, right? I think Boise State will have a chance. They're leading this conference right now. You could have Utah State on the outside. I think the number of teams this conference gets depends on whether there's an upset in the conference tournament. The Pac-12. UCLA leading it at 7-0, 16-2 overall. Arizona State, very surprising. Billy Hurley has this team doing what they expected him to do with this team when they hired him away from Buffalo a few years ago. On the verge of potentially losing his job here at the end of last year, the beginning of this year. He's got this team playing really good basketball, 15-3. So UCLA, Arizona, USC, Utah resurgent this year. Arizona. And then you're going to have maybe Oregon, maybe Washington. So they could get five. They're going to get between 5 and 7 picks in. Outside Final Four shot here. Don't sleep on the Utah Utes. And my picks will change as we go forward in bracketology because that's the way college basketball is. Opinions change from week to week. Southeast Conference should get a boatload of picks. Alabama, easy, leading this conference. Still tied with Texas A&M undefeated, but they got 2 games in hand. 16-2 overall, ranked 4th in the country. Texas A&M should get in. Tennessee will get in. Auburn will get in. Then we get to some guys on the fence, but they're not going to get just 4 picks. Florida will probably get in. Georgia's got a shot. Kentucky's still in play. Missouri playing much better basketball. I do think they get in. And that might be it, depending on what Arizona does to recover from their 1-4 conference start. LSU and Arkansas could be on the outside looking in, or they could sneak in, giving them this conference again could get between 6 and 9 picks, I would say. And I did want to touch quickly on the West Coast Conference. Gonzaga, as I talked about, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, year after year in the top of this league, battling it out. Gonzaga's won 11 straight after a tough start, not playing the type of basketball that they played in years past. They don't have the explosive guard play that they've had here these last several years, especially 2 years ago when they made a run to the title game and probably should have won against Baylor. And if you want a sleeper here, don't sleep on St. Mary's. Can always do some damage come tournament time. So these 2 teams will probably make the NCAA tournament. I do think BYU will also make the tournament. 3 bids out of the West Coast Conference. That's it. That's it for that. That's all we're going to talk about there tonight. That's all we're going to talk about in general because, guys, we're going to wrap it up. It's been a fun night. Hopefully you guys will get more into basketball as we move forward, but we will continue to talk about college football every week. There'll be news every week because college football, like the NFL, has found a way to keep themselves in the conversation year-round, it seems. So there'll be coaching news. We're probably not going to have the changes in the Big Ten that I thought we might have, but we'll get in next week. We'll talk about some of the portal moves and some of that off-season stuff that really drives me crazy, like NIL deals and everything else. And we'll stay in touch with the college basketball world. You've been watching TGI Sports Talk's College Sports Huddle with Keith Engel right here on Northeast Streaming Sports, simulcast on Let's Talk Sports. We'll catch you next week with all the college news, and we'll be back Friday with Are You Serious with the Mad New Yorker. Guys, have a great night.